Good morning. Now we are starting the next session on OCT in interventional cardiology. This lecture is going to be presented by Dr. Rajpal K. Abhichand. He's a chairman cardiology and interventional cardiologist and director of cardiovascular research and innovation in GKNM Hospital, Coimbatore. He has various publications and he's published various articles and is a pioneer in transradial coronary angiography and angioplasty in India, and he performed India's first transradial rota stenting and part of the team that performed the world's first percutaneous management of Luton-Barker syndrome. He is a proctor of complex coronary PCA and rota ablation. So we are going to hear from the expert from OCT in interventional cardiology. Over to you, Dr. Rajpal.
So I would like to thank the Sri Lankan College of Cardiology for giving me this opportunity, and I bring you greetings from GKNM Hospital, Coimbatore, India. Over the next 20 minutes, we will look at OCT in interventional cardiology. I shall divide my talk into 5 small bits: image interpretation, comparison of IVUS and OCT, which image modality to choose and why, my preferences, OCT in PCI, and 3 illustrative brief cases. The first, before we actually we understand the interpretation, we look at a few terms which we use during interpretation of OCT. The first one will be backscatter, which we get when the reflection of light waves come from the tissue back to the catheter. And when there is high backscatter, it reflects a brighter pixel, and low backscatter reflects a darker pixel. Attenuation refers to the reduction in intensity of light waves as they pass through the tissue. So we'll get to this. And the composition of the tissue that we see can be homogeneous, heterogeneous, coarse, or fine. And we use the word edge or border, which refers to the interface between different tissue types. Now, this is a normal. This is an OCT image of a normal vessel. This is the guide. This is the imaging catheter, and since it's a monorail segment, this refers to the guide wire, and this is the guide wire shadow. Here we see up to here is the intima on the right of your screen. This is the media, and what we see, just are able to see, is the adventitia. So now the commonest plaque that we have is a fibrous plaque. If you look very closely, the fibrous plaque is extremely homogeneous. And as I told you, high backscatter. High backscatter means it is signal rich and you get very bright pixels. You see this entire fibrous plaque, it's very bright, signal rich. It is finely textured. And you are able to see behind this plaque. Now you're able to see the media and adventitia behind this plaque, which means that this allows light to pass through. So a fibrous plaque, this is a fibrous plaque. Now let's look at an image of a calcific plaque. A calcific plaque has very sharp edges. It is heterogeneous. It's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. You see the heterogeneity here very clearly. And it has low backscatter. It's not signal rich. But the important thing is you can look behind the calcium vis-a-vis or in contrast to IVUS, whereas IVUS you cannot see behind calcium. So the attenuation is low and deeper tissue can be visualized in a calcific plaque. As a comparison on IVUS, you see the arc of calcium on IVUS on your left. You see the arc of calcium here, but you can look behind the calcium. Here you don't see anything behind the calcium. And this is a fibrous plaque on the right. This is just to show you a comparison. Now the other plaque that we see is a lipid-rich plaque. A lipid-rich plaque, you cannot look behind it. The attenuation is very high. Tissue penetration of light is very low. It has diffuse shadowy edges and high backscatter at the surface, low backscatter behind. Basically, it is a plaque which will not allow you to look behind it. This is very important to keep in mind. So to summarize, we have 3 types of plaques: fibrous, lipid, calcium. Fibrous is bright pixels, homogeneous. This is the lipid plaque, which has little dark edge, dark pixels, diffuse edges. You can't look very well behind it. Calcium. This is calcium, which is sharp edges, non-homogeneous, and you can look behind it. The other images that we would see on OCT are the struts. A strut is opaque and bright reflection, and it casts a shadow. This is the standard metallic strut. This image is also something which we once in a way see. This refers to tissue prolapse. Tissue prolapse, you see a convex protrusion of tissue between two stent struts towards the lumen without any disruption of the continuity. Because if there's disruption, it would mean a dissection. So this is tissue prolapse between two struts, convex bulge, intact surface is tissue prolapse. This is another image refers to stent malapposition. You see a gap between the stent strut and the vessel wall. And here, this is when you see such type of inadequate apposition, this means that the stent is an underside stent where you see the entire stent is floating in the vessel. This refers to stent coverage. This is a strut, it's covered well. This is covered a little more. This is the stent strut, bright with a shadow, and this is the thickness of the neointimal hyperplasia. And this is in-stent restenosis. So having gone through these images, we look at some images of thrombi. So this is the vessel wall, this is the lumen, and this is a patient with ACS, and you see red thrombus. Red thrombus actually has very high backscatter. It is you see that it appears as a very bright, and you can unable to see behind it. So when you see tissue like this, something floating in the vessel wall, bright, high backscatter, and you're not able to see behind it because of high signal attenuation. This is white thrombus, which is red thrombus in compared to white thrombus. White thrombus is chronic. You're able to see through it. You get high backscatter, but tissue attenuation is low. You're able to look behind it. This is white thrombus. This is an image of dissection where you see a disruption of the luminal vessel wall, and this is quite easy to interpret when you see this floating like this, and actually blood has entered the media. This is an image of a dissection. This is another image of an intimal tear where it's just the surface of the intima has been raised, and you are able to clearly see the vessel wall behind it. So, having looked at the basic images, let us look at the other interventional modality that we have been used to, or which we have been using for quite a long time, is IVUS. So we need to compare IVUS and OCT. If you compare IVUS, both are good imaging modalities. Each one has its own role to play. The advantages of IVUS are there's an extensive clinical experience. IVUS has been used for almost 3 decades. And so it has a rich data. And another important advantage is that pre-intervention imaging is possible in most patients in IVUS without pre-dilatation. Sometimes this can be an issue with OCT. Penetration into the adventitia is much deeper, so you get true vessel sizing mid-wall or up to the external elastic lamina. And a lot of research has gone in with IVUS, so you have good data on the procedure results and clinical outcomes. IVUS predictors for restenosis are well established. A very important technique is when in CTO techniques, IVUS would stand to score because you can look at wire re-entry is possible with IVUS. But the disadvantages of IVUS is the IVUS images are difficult to interpret, could be very difficult to interpret. Tissue characterization is limited, doesn't see thrombus very well, doesn't look at stent, strut, tissue coverage because of its low resolution. Malapposition is limited, as you will see, and it has a low resolution on the longitudinal view. So OCT has its advantages. It has a 10 times higher resolution compared with IVUS, and you get extremely good images. Edge dissections are well seen, tissue coverage of stent, malapposition is brought out. You look at calcium very easily, it's better suited for calcium. You can assess thickness of calcium on OCT because it penetrates calcium. But on IVUS, you can only get the arc, you don't get the thickness very well. It's better suited for thrombus, as we saw. Images are very clear and relatively easy to interpret. And nowadays, the restenosis predictors are well established. Basically, it's extremely user friendly. Disadvantages of IVUS of OCT are there is additional contrast required. Each time you may have to give 10, 12, 13, 14 cc of contrast. Flushing is necessary to clear the lumen of blood. And when this OCT catheter enters, there may not be enough space for the contrast to be pushed in alongside with the necessary flush. So pre-dilatation may be mandatory. OCT, because of its high resolution and increase and shorter wavelengths, its penetration is very low. And compared to IVUS, the wealth of data and surrogate endpoints are much less. Clinical outcomes, there's no randomized clinical trial which has clearly shown. So IVUS OCT data is being gathered, and I'm sure we'll reach there very soon. So having looked at the advantages of OCT and interventional cardio and IVUS, let me see what my preferences are. My three clear indications for OCT are when there's an uncertain, unclear angiographic findings, when we want PCT optimization in the setting of long lesions, bifurcations, LMCA, and when there is stent failure. When would I not do an OCT? When the patient has severe renal failure, when it is impossible, I know it's impossible to deliver the catheter. Suppose there's an angulated circumflex coronary artery and very, very large vessels. So my three reasons to choose OCT over IVUS would be whenever a person is embarking on the imaging, because the images are very clear, easy to interpret, when you need very precise imaging, and when there is stent failure. Three reasons to choose IVUS over OCT would be LMCA clarity, and to assess LMCA significance, because we have the LETRO criteria, data from Korea, where you say, okay, above 6, then these are situations where we will not interfere in this left vein. So this data is only IVUS based. Osteal lesions are not well seen in patients with OCT. So these are the three situations where I would choose IVUS over OCT. So let us look at the role of OCT in PCI. OCT is in PCI in calcific lesions. When you see an arc of more than 180 degrees of calcium, with a thickness of more than 0.5 and a length of more than 5 millimeters, this calcific lesion is going to result in an under expanded stent, and therefore you will need to do something. You will need to fracture this calcium either by rota or lithotripsy, and you'll need to have some measure of doing this. And so therefore, once you do it, you can even look at calcium fracturing. And once you see calcium fracturing on such thick calcium, you know that you have prepared your bed adequately. Lipid-rich lesions. Now, the problem with lipid-rich lesions is there's an increased risk of peri-procedure myocardial infarction, increased risk of no flow or slow flow, and therefore, you would not like to land your stent because in a lipid-rich plaque, because the incidence of restenosis is much higher. So OCT would give us this clue. OCT would also help us choose stent diameter. So you always, because for safety purposes, you always choose the distal lumen reference diameter and upsize by 0.25. If you look at the external elastic membrane average of two orthogonal planes, you would like to downsize by 0.25. This is only for stent size selection, but obviously this will have to be followed by subsequent stent optimization. and one would like to avoid landing in an area with residual plaque burden of more than 50%, especially if it is in lipid-rich tissue. So, having chosen the stent, now having stented, one would like to have a good minimal stent cross-sectional area. So for non-NMCA lesions, if you have more than 4.5 square centimeters, then that's all right. But more importantly, one would like to have a minimal stent area of more than 80% of the average of the proximal reference stent reference area and the distal reference area. So you take the reference area distal to the vessel, proximal, take the average, and how many millimeters square you get. 80% of that, one should have an MSA which is more than 80% of the average reference luminal area. Malapposition in PCI. OCT is very sensitive for malapposition. So if you have a malapposition of more than 400 microns, more than 1 millimeter, one should look to correct it if it's anatomically feasible. So if there's an acute malapposition of less than 400 microns, less than for a longitudinal length of less than 1 millimeter, one would be happy to leave this alone as neoendothelialization does occur. What about tissue extrusion? Now, there's no data as to tell us how much of tissue extrusion is good, but what we can say is tissue extrusion is a feature of an adverse outcome, long-term outcome in patients with ACS. Dissections. Dissections are extremely common in patients with are extremely commonly picked up on OCT as compared to IVUS because OCT is more sensitive. So we don't react to every dissection that we see. So if a dissection is deep, entering the media, more than 60 degrees on lateral extension, goes for a length of more than 2 millimeters, involves the distal edge of stent, then this dissection has a higher incidence of stent thrombosis and one would like to tack it up and maybe put another stent in. So this is a cartoon of a stent which is in C2. And how did we choose this stent size? We looked at the we looked at the distal reference diameter, and you can upsize by 0.25 distal reference luminal diameter. If you choose the distal reference external EM diameter, you downsize by 0.25 and choose your stent. Having deployed it, we look for a distal dissection. If you have a distal dissection of more than 60, less than 60 degrees, less than 2 millimeters, does not reach the intima, we leave it alone. If you have a distal dissection of more than 60, flap intima is going into the media, length is more than 2 millimeters, you probably need to put a stent. Extensive protrusions, you may have to tack it up with a balloon dilatation, wait for some time and see if you can push this protrusion back. Malapposition. If you have a malapposition of axial distance of more than 500 microns, less than 500, less than 1 millimeter, do not touch, more than 400 microns, more than 1 millimeter length, and if it is anatomically possible, then we need to tack up, we need to post dilate this stent. Suppose it's not anatomically possible, we have no choice, we may have to leave it alone. This is the minimal stent area. If the minimal stent area is, say, in a non-left main is more than 4.5 millimeters, and you have a average, it is 80% of the, more than 80% of the average reference luminal diameter between the proximal distal, then this we probably leave it alone. Anything less, we need to go in and post dilate to see that the long-term outcome is very good. So having looked at how to stent and what do we do with stenting, let us look at 3 cases, brief introduction. And this is the first case of a plaque erosion. I would like to thank Dr. Satyamurthy for allowing me to use this data. It is his data. This is a 30-year-old male who presented with ACS. CAG showed thrombus in the proximal LAD with TIMI3 flow. And this is the IVUS image. Now, if you look at the IVUS image, you clearly see this looks like normal vessel, you're coming from distal to proximal. As you reach this segment, which we are going to reach, you see there's a plaque erosion and some red thrombus. So this is red thrombus. You don't see well behind it, and areas of plaque erosion. And this is a plaque erosion, which is very clearly seen on on OCT. This will never be able to see on IVUS. This is a plaque erosion, and this actually justifies leaving this patient alone. We may have done this without seeing OCT, but having seen OCT, it gives a very, very clear idea of what happened. And we just repeat an angio after a few months, and what we see is the thrombus has disappeared, and this is the area of plaque erosion which has healed very, very well, and it's almost totally disappeared. So this patient, the OCT helped us understanding the underlying pathophysiology in this patient, and helped us justify our decision not to stent in spite of this patient presenting with an acute coronary syndrome. Let us look at the second case. The second case is a case of malapposition. Now, look at this angiogram carefully. This is a patient with an evolved anterval MI, significant viable myocardium. And what we see here is a very, very large open diagonal. The ostium of the diagonal is open. So you see a very large diagonal, you see a very large LAD, and after this diagonal, the vessel size suddenly drops. So this would be an ideal setting for malapposition in the proximal main vessel. And this is the proximal main vessel, distal main vessel, and this is the side branch. So this would be a very, very, in this case, one would look very clear because you have to choose a stent according to the distal main vessel. So we wired both, pre-dilated both, and we had to use a reverse wiring technique because the angle was very unfavorable. If you look at the angle again, I'll just go back just to show you this angle. If you look at the angle of the diagonal angle actually goes up like this. So we had to use the microcatheter assisted reverse wiring technique, and we stented. After stenting, we had to choose a stent according to the distal main vessel. This is very important. So we choose a 2.75 into 38 millimeter stent was deployed. A 3 millimeter pot was done. Wires were exchanged. Then after wires were exchanged, we actually post-dilated once again. And we post-dilated with the proximal main vessel with a 4 into 8 millimeter balloon. And then if you look at this, it looked very good, but we were not sure at all because although it looks very good, the proximal main vessel proximal to the bifurcation looks good. We did an IVUS, and lo and behold, we saw malapposition on IVUS. This was visible even on IVUS. So it was almost 600 microns to 800 microns. We post-dilated with a 4 mm balloon, repeated the IVUS, and here we saw that there was no significant malapposition on IVUS. But we still had a doubt because we knew that the proximal main vessel was very huge. Then we did an OCT. OCT showed clearly, if you look at the OCT, these images are a little jumpy because of a stitch artifact. But if you look at the images below, if you look at the images below and to your left, you see gross malapposition, almost up to 600 microns malapposition in the proximal main branch. So what did we do? We post-dilated with a 4.5 millimeter balloon. And we did it's like doing a pot with a 4.5 millimeter balloon, after which we see beautifully that the entire OCT segment, we repeated an OCT and we were able to see that there's absolutely no malapposition. So this is a very good example. And if you recollect the image, please understand that there was gross disparity between main branch, proximal, and main branch distal to the bifurcation segment. So this is a wonderful case wherein OCT actually helped us to make absolutely sure that we did not leave a malapposition. And this clearly crossed the criteria of 400 microns for a length of more than 2 millimeters. This was in the malapposition after using a 4 mm balloon in the proximal male segment. Going to high pressures, we had 600 microns malposition.
Dr. Abhichad, your time is ending. Please quickly
Yes,
finish
I have
that.
just a minute. So this was the final result. And one more case, I'll just rush through. 49-year-old male who had a stenting done outside. The the culotte stenting stent was deployed in the left main. Proximal LAD, they presented with ACS. We decided to use a culotte on this already deployed stent. And the OCT showed us that we had crossed through the distal strut, which is exactly where we wanted to cross, predilated, stented, potted, wires exchange. And this repeat pot was done, final angio. And this is the culotte stent. We see the circ and the LED. So in this case, to conclude, in this case, we had to use a culotte stenting, and IVUS helped us to make sure that we crossed the distal strut. And OCT also helped us make sure that we saw the strut of the stent of the previously deployed stent across the mouth of the ostium of the circumflex. So the only method we had to choose was culotte, because as you can see, the circumflex is a huge vessel. So thank you for a patient listening. If there are any questions, we're happy to take them.
Yeah, before the interest of time, I would not go for the questions. Actually, on behalf of the College of Cardiology, let me be thank to today's presenter, Dr. Abhichad. Thank you very much for that informative lecture. We learned a lot from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.